Hello and welcome to the inaugural 2025 edition of Legislative Update here on Okemo Valley TV. My name is Tom Ayres. I'm the senior staff writer for the Vermont Standard newspaper. And my guest this week, as always, in this coming legislative session is Charlie Kimbell, the House member from the Windsor-5 District,
That's right.
comprising Woodstock, Plymouth, and Reading. Hello,
That's
Charlie.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me. Glad to be
Yeah,
here.
it's really good to see you. Well, welcome back to the state legislature. You're back in Montpelier after a 2-year hiatus,
True.
and elected by the people Windsor of Windsor 5 in November of last year. How's the first couple of weeks been going for you?
It's good. I mean, in many ways, it's like going back to high school because I left, I graduated, and then I got roped back in to come back. And there are a lot of familiar faces that I know and a lot of new people that have just joined the legislature. So it's a lot of freshmen.
Yeah,
So getting
absolutely.
to know them and
Yeah.
it's been good because it's almost like I didn't leave in some respects and able to pick up where I left off 2 years ago. Tesha Busk did a great job representing Woodstock, Reading, and Plymouth, but life gets in the way, and so she decided that she couldn't really serve in that capacity. So
Sure,
um,
sure.
I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to run for election. But the seriousness of the issues facing the state convinced me that I wanted to have a seat at the table, at least to be involved with those discussions, trying to find out solutions for Vermont's most vexing problems.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be exploring many of those vexing problems in the coming weeks, particularly two that have been articulated by representatives on both sides of on all three sides, I guess you could say, of the political
Mhm.
aisle at the State House: education,
Mhm.
financing reform, and housing. But for this week, for the inaugural edition of Legislative Update for this session of the legislature, I'd like to just talk a little bit about your role in the legislature in this term, and specifically your committee assignments and some of
Sure.
your other activities in Montpelier. Beginning with, you've been named as the ranking member of the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. First of all, tell our listeners what the ranking member means and what that committee's primary purview.
Sure. So each committee has three leadership positions on the committee. So there's the chair of the committee, the vice chair, and the ranking member. And the ranking member really is the person who keeps the people on the committee informed of what's going on, usually someone from the majority party, and then helps organize people in that party on the committee, just kind of focusing on what's going on. So I was ranking member on the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development when I was in the House before. And now I've been named that on the Committee on Ways and Means. So it's a different view, but that's my role now, and it's interesting because we have I can never remember the numbers. It might be seven seven Democrats and five Republicans. It might be eight Democrats and four Republicans, one or the other. Yeah.
Mhm. Uh,
Uh,
yeah, pardon my mistake that I was looking at an old legislative listing dating back to your previous term.
yeah.
But so not on that committee anymore.
Mm-mm.
Fill our people in on the Ways and Means Committee post then.
Sure. Yeah. The Ways and Means Committee basically is charged with raising revenue to support state government. So it's really about taxes and fees. And how do you support things like the education system? How do you support the general fund? What's a reasonable level of taxation? Dealing with the income brackets. What are those? We have four income brackets, income tax brackets in the state. The big thing this session is going to be around the education fund, the separate $2.3 billion fund. So it's really trying to figure out what's fair and reasonable and sustainable to support state government. And it's the committee assignment I hoped I would get for this session.
Mhm.
I had been on the same committee before on commerce and economic development for 6 years, So I'm new to this committee, but I was lucky enough to be named the ranking member, which gives you a little more authority when talking to some of the people in the tax department and some of the people in the administration. So that's great.
Would it be fair to say that Ways and Means committees, whether it be in the Senate and the House or even at the federal level, really set the broad agenda for the legislative bodies in any given term?
Yeah, it's the policy committees, for instance, let's just take education and everything that's happening there. They really come up with the how the school should look or what the policies are, even for the use of cell phones in schools, that type of stuff. But whenever it affects the revenues of the state, that's when Ways and Means looked at it. So it is in many ways an expression of the values of the legislature and the representatives. So what are you willing to raise in money to support different programs? So that often is that together with the appropriations committee. If you're willing to spend money on something, that means you value it.
Mm-hmm.
And how you get that money also is an expression of who you think should be paying. That's always the biggest question: who pays? And that's what the Ways and Means Committee deals with. It's always nice to say that would be great to have, but are you willing to pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we deal with every day.
How does it work if the recommendations, let's say, for example, of the Education Committee or
Hmm.
of Housing and Community Development, put forward proposals that are, let's say, well beyond the means of what the Ways and Means Committee can think, can believe the state can afford?
Yeah.
How do those negotiations between the respective committees happen?
Well, that's a really good question because there's both process and then there's politics. And the process is that every bill that has an impact on money has to go through those money committees, both who spends it, the appropriations committee, and how you raise it, the Ways and Means Committee. So it has to take stops along the way before the full legislature will vote on it. So there's that input. The Joint Fiscal Office provides the Ways and Means Committee and also the Appropriations Committee with an analysis of how much is this really going to cost,
Mhm.
and what is the impact on taxpayers. So those are the Joint Fiscal Office has economists on staff, and they work to the best of their ability to estimate what that impact is going to be. So we rely on them heavily to do the math, to be able to say, okay, this is really what this particular program that's being proposed is going to spend X, but based on the revenue source that's been identified, it's only going to raise Y.
I
So
see.
are you gonna raise another tax to make up the difference, or
Mhm.
are you going to go back to that committee and say we can't afford it?
Mhm.
So that's the politics of it, is that sometimes that's worked out before it goes through the whole process. But other times it has to go through that process because you're not really sure how much it's going to cost.
Right. Right.
So that's kind of, thank God for the JFO, the Joint Fiscal Office.
I noticed that, speaking of that, that you serve on the Joint Fiscal Committee.
Yes.
Is that a kind of a compendium of representatives of the Ways and Means and Appropriations, or what is that body?
Yeah, so you're right. There's two members from both the Ways and Means Committee and the Appropriations, and its sister relationship with the Senate, their Appropriations and Finance Committees. And there's then two other members that get named to it. Teresa Wood is the other person from the House side. And what that committee does is it reviews all of the grant receipt requests that the government has. So oftentimes the state government brings in grants from the federal government or other sources that have to be vetted to say, yeah, this we're willing to accept this with all the strings attached or no strings attached,
Hmm.
so that state government can get those resources and then enact that program. So the committee meets about 4 times a year, and some of its deliberations are fairly involved and intense, and others are pretty perfunctory. It's like it's a $2,000 grant. Okay, no problem. But it's a $5 million grant. Well, that's a different issue. So during COVID, there are a lot of grants from the federal government that had to go through that joint fiscal committee. And it became very meaningful as to what the deliberations were. So I'm really looking forward to serving on that. It was a great honor to be named that. I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to do it.
Mhm. Um, you're being named to House Ways and Means and the Joint Fiscal Committee. Does that flow through your party or some other kind of bipartisan body that determines committee appointments?
Well, in the House, the Speaker has ultimate authority in naming people to committees. And then for the Joint Fiscal Committee, she announces those committee appointments to the body. In the Senate, it's different. There's a committee of three, and they make their appointments to the different committees that are joint or even to their own internal committees. So it's really that. I mean, there's a lot of conversations that go on
Right.
amongst
Yeah.
both the majority leader and the minority leader as to how to staff committees, because you really want a well-functioning body. And so a lot of that is figured out as to temperament, demeanor, but also political party views, what their background is. And that
Hmm.
really goes into this huge sorting hat, if you will, to carry Harry Potter's expression as to who goes to what committee. And it's sometimes it's not easy. You know, someone that may have been on one committee for 10 years, they've served that long, and they express an interest in going someplace else. It's hard to lose that insight, but you might need their skill set maybe on appropriations because they have such institutional knowledge at that point.
Right. I
Yeah.
see. I see. Delving into politics just a wee bit before we wrap things up. Um, the Joint Fiscal Committee vets grants from the federal government, among other responsibilities. Do you anticipate any particular challenges this term, given the change in federal leadership, both in the White House and at the Senate and Congress, House levels?
I think everyone in Vermont state government, not only in the legislature but also in the administration, is keenly aware and sensitive to what's going to happen in terms of those grant sources. And the state government receives a lot of support in our transportation fund, in the labor department, in education. So there's in Medicare, Medicaid. So there's huge dollars that could be affected by a decision, different decisions made in Washington. So we're all very watching it closely to see what
Mhm.
happens in this new administration. And I'm hopeful that there won't be major disruptions, but you never know. Even it could affect our bond rating. So we're looking at
Oh,
how
absolutely.
how does that impact? You know, there are different initiatives that we've taken on. You know, increasing the number of EV charging stations. Is that going to be supported by the Trump administration? Don't know. I mean, what they've said and what they actually do could be two totally different things. So we're really trying to be very on top of it. But I don't know yet.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't want to say it's above my pay grade, but other folks are trying to figure it out, and I hope they do.
Hmm. Hmm. And lastly, speaking of political realignments, the House and the Senate have both lost their what Senator Clarkson likes to call their veto-free majorities
Yeah.
uh, in this session of which I think were held for the last one or two bienniums. Am I correct?
The last biennium was a supermajority in the House.
Okay.
That was the only time, but the Senate had an overwhelming majority of senators on the Democratic Party. So it's
Right.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so what are the dynamics like so far, and what do you anticipate as a member of the Democratic majority, what your experience and your fellow Democratic legislators' experiences are going to be this term, broadly speaking?
Yeah. Well, first, you always look to the leadership of committees to figure out has something changed. And in the past few terms, there was only one chair of a House committee that was a Republican. And then in the current, and many of the leadership positions, there were not Republicans named. In this current legislative session, there's two Republican chairs, and there's also many of the vice chairs are also Republicans. So it's an acknowledgement that there's been a shift.
Hmm.
And so that we're dealing with a different dynamic. That said, a lot of the Republicans that have been elected are first timers. And it's going to take them a while to kind of figure out the rhythm of legislation, how it works, where they can apply pressure, how they affect policy, that kind of stuff. So there's a
Hmm.
learning curve there. The third thing I'd say is that I don't know if it's ever been the case where Republicans, Democrats, members of the House, members of the Senate, members of the administration are all aligned on the priorities. And that for this session, it's on education financing and this
Hmm.
housing and climate resilience. So you've got these major issues that everybody's saying, yes, these are the most important. We have to move forward. So there's a willingness to discuss it, to work together, to figure it out. So that's different. In the past, it was a lot of the times it was the Democrats saying, this is the policy we're going to be voting on. And the Republicans said, whatever, do whatever you want. Doesn't matter what we think,
Hmm.
but now they're saying we have a seat at the table. We're going to govern together. And that's a big difference.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And I think it's healthy for the state. I really do. I'm glad I'm still in the majority party, but it's healthy for the state to have those candid conversations and to work together as not only just one body or the other, but the three working together.
Yeah, and it's encouraging, at least that the priorities are mutually agreed upon by all the bodies. That is housing, education, reform, and climate
Yeah,
response.
yeah.
Uh, at least you have that common ground as a starting off point. So,
We do. I mean, don't forget about healthcare expenses. That's really high, but
oh
but the
yeah,
other, yeah. I mean, they're all interrelated
absolutely.
in many ways. But we are aligned, so it's very promising that I think we'll have a very productive session.
Good, good, good. Well, that's great to hear. Well, Representative Charlie Kimbell, I thank you for joining me today and look forward to the next 12 weeks or so of legislative updates as we begin to delve deeper into the issues facing the State House this term. This is Tom Ayres for Okemo Valley TV and Legislative Update, signing off until next week. Take care, everyone.
Tom, thanks so much.